The 2020 Ohio No-Till Field Day, like many things, has a new format thanks to COVID-19. We're just outside of Plain City, and I have a panel discussion of a group of farmers and industry folks that we're going to discuss no-till and cover crops, which is fitting for the Ohio No-Till Field Day, but really focus kind of on implementing cover crops into an operation. Like I said, I've got kind of a wide variety of folks here, and we'll start with Cody Beacom down on the end, and I'll have everyone kind of explain a little bit about their operation. Martha Winters, Fred Yoder, and Nathan Brown is joining me. Cody, why don't you start off and explain a little bit about Bart Agronomics?
Sure thing. So Bart Agronomics is a cover crop seed company. We're based out of Mount Vernon, also work out of Bowling Green as well. I took the operation over from Leon Burt a couple years ago, and we've slowly been expanding, and our focus is on cover crop seed and also gearing custom mixes towards folks' specific needs and helping them meet what their goals are. So been a pretty interesting ride and fun to see the industry evolve as we move along.
Martha?
Well, I am in the last year of transition, taking over my grandfather's operation just outside of Fremont, Ohio. We farm corn and soybeans. My parents did not farm, but my grandfather did, and I decided I wanted to do that. Went to Purdue, got a master's in agronomy, and came back to the farm in 2015, and we started cover crops then, and have increased our acreage every year.
Fred?
Well, we've been farming here for over 40 years. We've been selling seed for over 40 years. We have a business called Yoder Ag Services here that we offer consulting services as well as seed sales and precision agriculture parts of it. We've been long-term no-till cover crops, and looking forward to the discussion.
Nathan?
Yeah, I'm a first-generation farmer. I farm in Highland County. We raise corn, soybeans, and wheat, and we have a cow-calf operation too. And really we got into doing cover crops in around 2011, 2012, and we've expanded that, and we're almost 100% covered nowadays, and as much no-till as possible through the years, and we're really starting to see the benefits from it.
All right, so let's start and let's talk about no-till for a second. I farm a little bit. I've been a long-term no-tiller since 1992. In your opinion, guys, why aren't we seeing more no-till acres? What's that first hang up from a guy that's farming? What's his first, I guess, excuse to not look at no-till? I mean, yeah, Nathan, why don't you start as a first-generation farmer? You didn't come in with any preconceived notions per se.
No, I didn't. And actually, when I started, one of the farms that I rent had a swine operation on it, and we were getting a lot of manure off of it, and they were doing a lot of injection at that point in time and tearing a lot of the ground up. And as a first generation farmer, it was tough on me because I was having to go out and buy big equipment, and plus the labor on top of that to get those fields worked down and to plant it in a timely manner. And for myself, it was pretty easy transition once I could get the guys to apply the manure in a way that we weren't tearing up the ground. But I never had any preconceived notions either coming into this. I know I talked to a lot of my friends, around the neighborhood that are still conventional tillage, and I actually run into one not very long ago, and he says, so what does it take to no-till? How do you no-till? I was like, I had to scratch my head a little bit. It's like, you wait till the ground's fit, you take the planter out and you plant. And he was always in that mindset of, I got to go out, I got to rip everything up in the fall, we got to go back out in the spring, lay our anhydrous down, then go back and work everything down. And they like being in a tractor cab, I guess. I have a young family, so I like doing other things. I don't want to be in a tractor cab all the time. So maybe Fred's got a little bit different perspective than I do, but
No, actually, you asked the question, why don't more farmers accept no-till? And because tillage is fun. Like the old Tim the Toolman Taylor, hey, dig that dirt up and it's very forgiving as well. So you can take some, wetter conditions or drier conditions and just sort of forgiving. No-till is a management tool. I know, we were, for many years, we no-tilled our soybeans, but we conventional tilled our corn until I decided, well, why wouldn't it work in corn too? And I had a landlord that was really encouraging me to try that, and we did it, and it was very successful. I did it for economic reasons to start with, but I tell you, after 4 to 5 years, when you go through that change in your ground conditions, if you can hang in there for 4 or 5 years, they'll probably stay forever. But it's just, you got to go through that transition because you have to condition your ground to be able to do no-till continuously. But again, it's you got to get away from that recreational tillage and do things more on the economic basis.
So a guy will say, well, I can't afford 4 or 5 years of lower yield because I'll be out of business. How do you combat that answer or that response?
Well, you have to look at the whole economic deal, because remember, you're saving money by limiting your tillage as well. So you have to consider the economics of saving those trips over the field, and again, putting that into maybe be able to afford a few bushels less. But you got to look at your soil, the soil profile as your 401k. You got to look at that as you got to keep enhancing your soil resilience for future years, and so that's why you have to think of it as long-term beneficial change to your system. Because if you're looking at it on return on investment instantaneously, you're probably not going to get it right off the bat. But you stick with it, and you will. It's a transition to a different system.
So Martha, you're farming with your grandpa. Clearly, he grew up loving tillage and probably a moldboard plow. Had he transitioned into no-till prior to you entering the operation, or did you have to convince Grandpa that we need to do something different?
No, I think we're a little different in that. He switched to no-tilling beans in the 80s and started strip-tilling his corn in 2006 and putting fertilizer down with it. So when I came in 2015, that was the system, and it was relatively progressive. He got away from moldboard plowing a long time, as soon as he felt like he could. He's always been minded on erosion, and that has really stuck with me. We're in a flat part of Ohio, and
you're northwest Ohio. You've got some interesting soils up there in Fulton County.
We're definitely heavier clays. We have all range though, really, on our farm. We do farm Hoytville, but we have Kibbe fine sandy loam, and that tends to blow. And so our erosion concerns are more wind-based, and a cover crop really speaks to that. The cover crops we started, it was really Grandpa's idea to start it, and I said okay, because I came in from college and didn't know what we were doing. So we tried it. We got a cost share to kind of take some of the financial burden away and help us pay for the airplane to put it on, because we didn't have a drill. And that's where we started, and we've increased our acres.
So I'll jump back to Fred real quick, being a long-term no-tiller. So your neighbor that says, boy, I'd like to try no-till, but I can't afford, I'm farming too many acres. I can't afford to wait that 2 extra days that I see you and Josh waiting to get the planter out. How do you answer that guy that oh, I'd like to do it, but I've got too many acres, I got to get it in?
I'd say he's probably farming too much if he can't do it on a timely basis. And we've actually done this in the past in no-till. You can't hold yourself. We've had a lot of rainy conditions, but I guarantee you, if you plant it too wet, there's unintended consequences. So it takes patience, but it also takes management and perseverance. You've got to do things at the right time, at the right way, and if you do that, you'll be successful. But if you break the rules, then you're going to have unintended consequences. So it's just a matter of, you've got to dedicate yourself to do the right things and make sure you do, because if you don't, that's why a lot of people stick with the conventional waste, because you can get by with breaking the rules, so to speak, but you end up with less yield if you break the rules as well. So for optimum, you got to decide what your outcome is desired to be, and then you work toward that. And you can't jump over certain steps if you're going to expect optimum yields.
So Nathan, as a first-generation farmer, how hard is it for you, or was it when you were no-till, and your neighbors, that conventional ground is fit and your no-till's not quite ready. How hard is that for you to wait?
Well, to be honest with you, I live in farm in a area of the state where no-till is very conducive. So,
Which is Highland County.
we're in Highland County. We're in the northern part of Highland County. And if you know anything about Highland County, the southern half is really rolly, and then once you get to the northern half, we are flatter. But really, we still have that roll to it, and we have some Claremont soils and that kind of thing that just have been really conducive to no-till. I have to go up in the Clinton County or Fayette County to really see those guys, tearing a lot of ground up. So, it's still something that we have to learn because social media, you're always looking on social media and you can see your friends across the state, wherever they're tearing up ground, they're going to town on it. And you're sitting here, scratching your head, if I got one more day, I could be planting. And then, you got rain in the forecast. And sometimes it really pushes you to know that, what your limits are and to have the patience to do that. So, it's definitely is a learning curve.
So Cody, let's jump into cover crops. So you sell cover crops, that's part of your business. What's kind of your elevator speech to a farmer to convince him to at least take a look at a cover crop program?
So I guess it's a multi-pronged approach, I think. Obviously, from the economic standpoint, there's some benefits to be had, but I think, like Fred mentioned, you kind of got to look big picture at some of the benefits to be gained. Obviously, environmentally, cover crops are a pretty good thing too. So to be a good steward, I think that's definitely something that would be conducive to using cover crops as well. For somebody starting new, I am a little more conservative. I think it'd be better for somebody to start small. Then there's, if something goes wrong, it's not that big of a deal. It's a learning experience. They can learn from that and then move along and have a greater chance of success in the future. I just hate to see somebody jump in with both feet, have a bad experience, get a bad taste in their mouth, write off cover crops, and not do it again.
So I'm going to have you guys answer this question, all of you. What's the biggest challenge you see for a farmer with a cover crop?
I think initially sometimes it can be mindset, honestly. Getting over maybe what they've done in the past or not being as open to trying something new. That can be a hard pill to swallow for a lot of folks, and rightfully so. If they've done something for a long time, felt they've been successful at that, and then throw something else out there that's completely new, that can be a hard pill to swallow. Again, if we start small and work through that, then it's a lot easier to manage, I think.
Martha, what's your biggest challenge with cover crops?
Our biggest challenge is probably our rotation. Corn, soybeans doesn't leave much time in the fall to get some of the mixes planted, and you feel that you're not doing maybe enough with just rye, but I think there's quite a few benefits there. So,
Fred?
Well, I agree with Martha that, our Bubba-proof cover crop is rye, cereal rye, because you don't have that much time. We've experimented, especially after wheat, when we still grew wheat, with some other mixes like winter peas and radishes and different things like that, but you have more time. Unless you go to a real early variety of soybeans or corn, you don't have a whole lot of time to do that. So, but rye is very good at overwintering, and it springs up in the spring, and it makes a lot of... The thing that the benefits of cover crops you have to also understand, anytime you have a growing crop out there, you're increasing your microbe activity and your soils. Soil health, we hear more about soil health today than we have in all the years of my farming. It used to be that we'd look at things, if you add X, Y, and Z, then you'll be successful, and you can be. But you also have to understand with these big rain events that some of the nutrients don't stay put. And so if they wash off, you have to replace them. So the idea of a cover crop is you can scavenge over some of those excess nutrients that you put on there, because you never want to put enough. I mean, you always want to put enough on there to grow your crop. So you scavenge those resources and use them for the next crop. So it's a mindset you got to figure out. And then at the same time, you're improving your soil health and your organic matter. Because when you have 1% organic matter, increase in your soil, you'll be able to hold an extra 25,000 gallon of water. And that means it's going to be good for a dry spell, but it also means when a big rain event that you have more capacity to hold it. So there's multiple benefits, not just one silver bullet, but there's a lot of benefits in different ways. We struggle with water quality in Northwest Ohio, and believe me, it's going to come to all over the state eventually. But we got to figure out how to manage this, and I think all those tools in the toolbox that we learn and can figure out the best way to use it is going to benefit us in the future.
Nathan, what's your biggest challenge with cover crops?
As a first generation farmer, I don't own a lot of the land that I farm, and so then how can I justify trying to build soil health, building soil organic matter, the microbes and everything on ground that I may not have next year. And I think, as we go forward, there's more and more land across the state. I don't know what 50-60% of the ground now is cash rented, and I think it's only going to continue to go that direction in the future. So how do you approach a landowner, show them and justify them what you're doing there in order to make it to be successful and to keep that piece of land? And I know a lot of the tillage guys, they're foaming at the mouth when they see these guys going in and putting a lot of cover crops and no-till on there, because they're thinking, well, if I could get that cash rented, I know I can go up there and rip that up and release all that carbon and stuff, and I can farm that ground cheap for 2 or 3 years and not have any inputs on it. Where, as a first generation farmer, I'm trying to build soil, build community. One of my mottos as a farmer is I want to farm better before I farm bigger. And that's really what led me down the path that I'm on.
Interesting. So I think general knowledge, general consensus, wheat needs to be in the rotation for a truly successful cover crop program. But do you grow any wheat?
Yes, I do.
Do you grow any wheat?
We haven't for the last few years.
Yeah. Martha, do you guys grow wheat?
We do not.
So and Cody, I'm guessing a lot of guys you deal with, because let's face it, wheat's not very profitable, and if you want to make wheat profitable, you got to hope for a good double crop soybean crop after your wheat. So let's talk about the challenges. Yeah, if you're growing wheat, there is a plethora of things you can do from a cover crop standpoint that really is beneficial. But let's talk about, those of us that are just in a corn soybean rotation. Cody, what's if you're talking to a farmer, kind of what's your recommendation if he's a corn soybean guy and he's not growing wheat?
Okay, so in that case, I think that, again, the easiest would be cereal rye ahead of soybeans. That's just a no-brainer. And then ahead of corn, some kind of mix with legumes in there. Preferably if you can mix it up and have like a clover, winter peas, or even hairy vetch, and you can throw in some rapeseed and maybe a little bit of rye as well.
So let's kind of break the state up a little bit. Northern Ohio, how late are you comfortable telling a guy that he can plant cereal rye after corn?
Oh, you can go up into December. No.
Okay, so even Northern Ohio, you're comfortable
Yeah.
that you can plant it even in December.
Yep.
So you get that. Clearly, it's only spring growth you're going to get at that point, but you feel there's enough benefit just in that early growth that it's still worth doing.
I will throw the caveat out there, though. If somebody intends to plant that late, but then they want to get in the field super early in the spring, it might be seriously worth considering the cost at that point, because if they want to get in there just might not be enough growth in the spring to really even justify the cost. So that's definitely something to think about.
So Martha, with you guys, just Fulton County, I mean, you're about as far north in Ohio as you can get. What's your kind of drop dead planting date that you guys talk about, from a cover crop standpoint?
Well, we're in Sandusky County.
Oh, I thought you were in Fremont.
Fremont's in Sandusky
Oh,
County.
that's okay.
But
I flunked eighth grade geography. Sorry,
so we're not,
Mr. Bolin would not be proud of me right now.
we are as
That's right,
far north
Sandusky, but you are still
we're far north because
the
lakes,
lake.
but there's Ottawa County in between. So, anyways, we just plant rye and we'll do it after corn and beans. And so we've planted as late as the 1st of November We, in general, have always planted shorter season hybrids and varieties because we don't have on-farm storage and we have to pay drying. And so we want our corn and our beans to be dry when we harvest, and so we're already usually done with harvest middle of October, end of October. And so we're able to get things seeded by then. And usually we have a good stand. In 19, things were a little later, and we didn't have much of a stand in the fall. We are still in the mindset of wanting to plant early, and so sometimes the cover crop doesn't get much growth. But even that year, I mean, we'd get 10, 12 inches of rye growth and then plant corn into it.
So I'm going to do a shameless plug for you, Fred. You're a DeKalb seed salesman. Martha talked about planting a shorter season variety and hybrid. Now, they're doing it because of not having storage. As a guy selling seed, are you comfortable talking a farmer into a shorter season, you know, whether it be a soybean or corn hybrid? Are you comfortable selling them that and telling them that you can still get the yields that your neighbors are going to get with a full season?
Well, I will say that depends. It depends on the hybrid. I mean, you have to have a lot of plant health in Ohio to get by. We have actually earlied up a lot of our varieties. In the past, we'd sell around here around 115 to 113 day corn, and we switched a lot to 108 day. In fact, this year a lot to 105 day, which lets you plant later because you got the window that you know, because of wet weather, you can be a little more patient and wait for the right time, but you also get it off earlier in the fall where you have a little more time to plant maybe some other cover crops. One of the things, though, that you haven't mentioned is the other values of cover crops, and that's weed control. You get a good stand of rye out there, and we've basically solved our whole issue of mare's tail. You don't see any mare's tail. You don't see any dandelion that we used to have. We crowd that out. We also save a trip over the field with chemistry because we use our burn down and add a little bit of grass herbicide, and then all we come back for was, you know, a post job. So we're actually using less chemicals on our farm, but there's a multiple amount of value that's not necessarily just for soil health. There's other things, and so you got to look at it as a system rather than just one thing. You got to determine what outcomes you're looking for, and there's a lot of reasons to plant cover crops.
You jumped ahead on me on that, Fred. I
Oh,
should
I'm
have
sorry.
shown you my list. That was
I'm sorry.
That was a perfect segue. So Nathan, cover crops, would you say I'm using cover crops for soil health? I'm using cover crops, you know, for my weed control. With a guy that's farming a bunch of rented ground, what would be kind of your follow-up to Fred's? Do you see enough value in cover crops that I can avoid, or I can afford to lose a farm that I've invested cover crops in because I've been able to farm it cheaper because of cover crops?
Yes, and that's something, you know, I've really noticed this year. As you drive around, you can see a lot of giant rags, a lot of water hemp. You know, I've noticed a lot of water hemp in our community that hasn't been there before. But you know, as I look at my fields, and I'm the same way, Fred. I've got some fields that in the past I've skipped my burn down pass because there was nothing out there to burn down. Then I've got other fields that I've actually been able to skip my post spray. You know, I go in and get a good burn down with a good residual there, and I've started roll crimping some of my cereal rye, and having that mat down on the ground has really been a great benefit to me as far as weed control. So, you know, again, it's a system. There's multiple things that I'm getting out of these cover crops, and you know, as you know, I always tell somebody starting out is pick that one thing that you want to get out of it and focus on that, and then you will see all the other benefits from it.
So Cody, how do you recommend for guys buying cover crop seeds from you? How do you recommend they get them established? Airplane, drill. I mean, what's your ideal method maybe for success?
Optimal is to get it in the ground somehow. I don't think there's any disputing that. But on the flip side, I think it also comes back to the operator themselves and what time will allow for them. You know, really what works best for them. So, you know, some people might just like using the plane because they can get it in, they can get it done, and it's a day out of their their year, and everything's done in their operation, and that's it. Other people really would just prefer to take a little bit extra time and somehow get in the ground. So I think it really just is a matter of comfort level and time for the operator themselves.
So Martha, you mentioned the airplane. Are you guys seeding most of it with the airplane, or have you moved to trying to get it planted?
We started with the airplane our first year, but after that we bought a turbo till, which is a shallow vertical till tool, and we bought a Valmar seeder and put on it. And we've been doing about 100 acres with the airplane just to kind of split our risk. That's done. Generally we're flying on the wettest 100 acres that was conducive to an airplane to fly on. And then we'd come back with our turbo till and seed the rest of it. But this year, we're just never quite happy with the stand. You know, it all depends on the weather after it's flown on. Sometimes you get a great stand, and like Cody said, it's done. That's a big benefit if it's really wet in the fall. But if you want a nice even stand across the whole field, you got to get it in the ground somehow. And we found the turbo till to be really useful for that. You can go 7 miles an hour, meters out very accurately. I will note, if you're 8 months pregnant, you have to go 4.5 miles an hour. You can't go that fast.
Fred, you and I need to keep that in mind, right?
Yes. But I appreciate what Martha's saying, because there is no single way to do it. I know we've done experiments with many different systems. So we've flown on cereal rye, and it's, in some years, if you get rain after you put it on, it's wonderful. Last year was a bust. We put it on and it never rained enough to get it really sprouted. So some of it actually got sprouted by spring. But we have a vertical till as well. We got an accelerator for Kuhn's Kraus, and we put a Valmar air seeder on that, and that's what we've been doing. But we're going to try something different this year. This planter right here, we're going to put some different plates in it to plant rye in 15-inch rows and see how that goes. I mean, one of the things that you're going to have to do to make a farmer really comfortable, it's going to have to be nimble and easy to use, because it's an extra trip over the field. And so we've gotten to the point where basically we're following up the combine right away, and basically, you know, within a couple of hours we're caught up. And so we think with the 40-foot planter here, we can even do a better job and have better placement, and maybe even cut the rate back a little bit too. And we also have the ability to maybe plant 2 different things in 2 different hoppers. So this is a constant experiment out here that we can always do better. You know, that whole word, like sustainability, you know, what may be sustainable today is not sustainable tomorrow, because there are better ways. So it takes innovators out there, and thank goodness we have some real innovators in Ohio, like you guys and companies like yours, like Bird, that really helps us figure out different ways. So let's just all work together and keep perfecting this. And the more we can perfect this and make it more user-friendly, the more farmers are going to do it.
So Nathan, what's your preferred seeding method?
My preferred seeding method, I always tell guys, use what you got in the barn, because everybody's got a planter. They've got something that will put a seed in the ground, you know. And once you get established and figured out, you know, that this is something you want to do long term, that's when you start investing in. You know, I'm the same way with these guys. I've got a Turbo Max that's got a turbo seeder sitting up on top of it, and that's how I seed probably about half of mine. Then the other half of it, we're trying to seed with an airplane. I've also got the plates for my Kinsey planter. After wheat, I'll go in and I'll plant radishes in one row, and I'll plant peas in the next row, you know, the front and the back, and do that. And I'm looking at a 15-inch row wheat this fall, 15-inch barley hopefully this fall, and then coming back maybe with my Kinsey planter and you know, trying to get my covers established afterwards with my planter. And really looking at how can we get those things established. Actually, I even did some interseeding this year. Dave and Jay Brandt, they've got a drill that's set up, a 20-foot drill that I planted some 60-inch corn, and we've got some covers that was interseeded in June, so I'm really excited to see how that goes.
All right, so let's talk springtime. You've got your cover crop established. Cody, do you recommend a guy plant green? Do you recommend he burns it off? What's your recommendation?
Again, I think it goes back to their comfort level. I think, personal opinion, there's a lot of benefits to planting green, and I think folks should at least try a little bit of that. But if they're really just kind of uncomfortable maybe first year, maybe just burn it off when it's pretty small and go about it that way. Now, on the flip side, if things get really pretty tall and things are kind of wet, I would absolutely not recommend spraying it and then come back and try and plant afterwards. That could just be a tangled mess and will really make you unhappy.
So Martha, what's your preferred, green, or what do you guys do?
We plant our soybeans green. We started off doing that. We had some good advisors that said, don't let it get too tall and then try to plant through it. But in the standing, the planter will just kind of move it to the side and you can plant through. You have to be careful that you don't let it get too big if it's getting dry because it'll suck the rest of the moisture out. But we only had that happen one year. And so we will plant the soybeans green, and then we've started putting rye ahead of the corn, and that we cut our rate back to 22 pounds. And because we're in a strip till system, we have a little area that doesn't have rye on it. And that we've planted some green, but mostly we'll kill that off maybe the same day we plant, just so that we don't have any kind of ill effects. We're not sure, there's talks about slugs, there's talks about allelopathic effects, and we haven't seen any of that, but we're just cautious starting.
Fred?
I think you have to be willing to adapt to whatever you're faced with. In a real wet spring, the nice thing about having a growing cover crop is it actually will remove a lot of the moisture and put it into a crop. So you're not only scavenging nutrients, but you're getting rid of moisture. And then you can go ahead and plant into that green crop, or you can kill it ahead of time. They say, for instance, it's a really dry spring. You may want to terminate it earlier and just go ahead and plant in that. So it depends on what Mother Nature's showing you. But that's the other thing too, is there's no really set way. You got to look at it as all these tools in the toolbox, and you pull out the tool that Mother Nature's telling you to use. So I really hate to say there's one way or the other, but we've done everything on the board. But again, I think as we go through this and you get more comfortable doing cover crops, I see more and more folks getting a little more comfortable planting green than what we had before. And I think that comes with maturity and the ability to handle challenges that you have with that. But I think there's some real pluses to that.
Nathan, I'm assuming you plant mostly green, or no?
Today we do, and it's been an evolution. I remember the very first cereal rye crop that I put out. I didn't know what I was doing. We threw it out there. It was a wet spring. We couldn't get in to terminate. Next thing I know, we got it terminated, and it was 6 foot tall. And I went out there and drilled it, and I was scared to death. And I swore at that point in time I was never going to do that again. Well, I started terminating all of my cereal rye. I try to have it terminated by the 20th of April every year. I'm only getting this much growth. And I really realized there's a lot more benefits from that extra biomass that's up there on top, plus what's underneath, the root development and stuff underneath. So I thought, I'm putting this money in these cover crops. Yeah, I'm getting benefits. I'm reducing my erosion. I'm reducing my nutrient runoff. But I think there's more that I can get out of this. And that's really led me down the road to now I want to plant everything green. We're planting corn and soybeans both green. And I want to plant when my cereals or my covers are mature. I don't want to go in and plant my corn, the 20th of April anymore. I want to plant my corn the 20th of May now. Because Cody said, we're putting some legumes and stuff in there, so we want to get all those benefits from legumes, all that nitrogen that's going to produce. We want to take advantage of that. So we're letting everything get green. We're even experimenting a little bit with planting our beans. I love planting beans early, but when you plant the beans early, your cereal rye is only this tall. So we're going in and planting. We've planted some early. But we're not terminating our cereal rye until that cereal rye is anthesis, and we're going in and actually roll cramping. We've roll cramped some at the second trifoliate and not seeing any very very little plant reduction, stand reductions from it, and we're gaining the extra days of the soybeans being in the ground, and we're gaining the extra biomass to help and reducing a lot of our weed and all the other pressures.
Now, Martha, you mentioned the allelopathic effect. Fred and I were talking with, and Josh, Fred's son, earlier before we started this interview, that you guys haven't really seen any allelopathic effect. Cody, I mean, is that, you know, agronomically, I mean, why are guys concerned about it if we've got folks that have, you know, fairly experienced with cover crops, not seeing that allelopathic effect of cereal rye and then corn?
I think there's just a lot of horror stories that some folks have experienced in the past that have just kind of trickled down, and it's kind of the fear that I don't really want to experience that. But I also know too that some folks, I think especially in cases where they have maybe removed, we'll say some rye for silage, that has caused more issues, especially ahead of corn. So there can be some nuances, but I think in general, I don't think a lot of folks have experienced the issues that maybe the horror stories would lead folks to believe.
Now, Josh was saying earlier that you guys have upped your nitrogen early, you know, just to kind of combat more of the nitrogen effect than an allelopathic effect.
Just trying to stay ahead of it and encourage rapid growth. We think that kind of helps.
So if you're intrigued with our conversation today, and you want to get some additional information, the Ohio No-Till Council has a webpage. It's ohionotillcouncil.com. Has a lot of great information. Nathan, you've actually started a Facebook page of a group. Talk about that just for a second if you're looking for additional information.
Yeah, I started the group, the Ohio Soil Health and Cover Crop. It's a personal group or a Facebook group where I think we've got over 1,000 people. Most of us are all from Ohio, but there's some people from across the state where it's just a good place. You know, if you've got a question about cover crops or want to share something that you're doing, whether you're trying to do 60-inch corn or you're grazing or whatever, it's just a good community where you can come and share and ask those questions, and you know, peer-to-peer is always the best. I mean, universities are great, they get out good information, but you know, to me, I get more information talking to peers than I do anything. So, great group.
And the Ohio No-Till Council also has a Facebook page as well. So there's a lot of information out there. If you are interested, and would encourage you to maybe think about starting. Start small, as everyone says. Experiment and find out. Cody Beacom, Martha Winters, Fred Yoder, and Nathan Brown. Appreciate you joining me, and I'm Bart Johnson with the Ohio AgNet. Thank you for joining us.